From Hong Kong, Chicago, and the city of Stoke-on-Trent, this is the Classic Lenses Podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 139. My name is Simon Forster and I'm joined by Johnny Sisson and Perry G. Hello, Johnny.
Hello.
And hello, Perry.
Yo, yo.
Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year.
You as well.
Yeah. It's been a while since we've been on. I don't think it's been quite a month, but it's probably not far from that. And we've missed you, and we've missed each other, and it's about time we actually got to talk to each other, which is what we're going to do, although it's going to be a relatively short show today. And so to kick things off, I just want to say thank you to Vladislav Kern for being our last guest, and ended 2020 on something of a positive note, which there weren't many in 2020, but Vlad's appearance and our many other guests for that matter were good things that happened last year. So fingers crossed 2021 is going to be much better. And so, but first of all, I think what we're going to do, we're going to have a chat with Perry, because Perry's got lots of things to say and to talk about, and he's been bursting. So we're going to unleash Perry now and see where it takes us.
Thank you. I don't know if I actually have loads and loads of stuff to say, because I actually have barely touched cameras in the last couple of months, and I don't know if that coincides with my no nut November, no gas end of 2020. There may be some correlation there, but
we never heard how Destroyer Dick December went, Perry.
Oh, I haven't bought anything. I've
okay.
bought absolutely. Well, I bought some Fixer,
okay,
which I still haven't used, because I don't know. Once you get out of the rhythm, it's not, especially in these times, it's not so easy to get back in. But I was sitting there thinking the other day, because a couple of people have contacted me on things like Instagram, my website, and things like that, basically saying, "Yo, are you alive? Why aren't you posting pics?" And I mean, I haven't really done any proper photography in the last couple of months. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, not so much.
Right. And one of the things I was thinking was, that's normal, right? It's normal to go through these periods of either lack of inspiration or just, I don't really feel like going out and shooting if the world is falling apart around me. But part of me suspects that the reason I haven't done it is just because I haven't bought anything new. And maybe those two things go hand in hand. But also, I don't know, like when I was doing a lot more street photography, there's a kind of connection with the surrounding subject matter where I find myself wanting to capture the ethos of the city as I'm walking around it. And Hong Kong has not particularly had a very good run since July 1st. And, increasingly when I go out, I'm thinking, well, if I'm taking pictures of geometric shadows and shapes around the city with people walking around in them, it doesn't seem to really reflect the descent into authoritarian chaos that we're currently undergoing. Plus with, of course, all this context of COVID. So I find myself just sitting there. I still carry a camera around everywhere, but I've been finding myself not particularly drawn to the surrounding subject matter, which I think kind of reflects the mindset of, I don't know, how Hong Kong and how the world seems. Although I did take a photo the other day, 4 frames, in fact, of some cold ass looking pigeons. Because it hit low single digits in Hong Kong temperature wise, which is very, very rare. So everyone's walking around in Canada goose jackets and freezing their butts off while I'm running around in a hoodie going, hey, this is like spring or autumn. But have you guys ever seen pigeons when they're really cold?
Oh, yeah.
So you know how they kind of sit on a branch and they like, they tighten up their shoulders and pull their head into their torso, right?
Right.
So they're like this. They're like, Our listeners can't see that, but I just imitated a cold pigeon into the webcam. So I took a couple of photos of cold-looking pigeons, and that was sort of the extent of my shooting this year so far. But yeah, I mean, I've just been sort of reflecting on why haven't I been shooting that much? Why haven't I really felt like doing it? And is that normal and okay? And I do get a sense that a lot of people are feeling the same kind of way, right?
Well, yeah, actually, if we can just park that slightly to one side, because it's interesting what you're saying there about what you've normally been doing is not really capturing the mood and the feeling of the city at the moment. And it reminds me, in a way, to what it was like when COVID first took hold, although it never really took hold in Hong Kong in the way it did in other places. But you still had a lockdown, and you had those deserted streets, and you went to the airport, and there was just like nothing there. And then you were faced with a problem there. So how do you actually make nothing there look as interesting in the photograph as the actual event was? Because it could just look like you just gone somewhere where it was quiet, because it shouldn't have been quiet, yet it was. And I'm just wondering if you've got a similar kind of problem with, as you say, trying to capture mood with photography in familiar circumstances.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about that and struggled with it because, for example, I've been thinking recently whether I should, for example, I could go and do a series of double exposures to try to reflect some of the mood of the place. But they're always really cheesy concepts that I get in my head, like a picture of Hong Kong skyline and then finding some fence with a sign on it that says like government property, no trespassing or something, and doing a double exposure like that. Where, it's not particularly subtle, but sort of is reflecting the sort of mood and thinking. So I've been toying around with ideas like that, but that requires, finding locations and traveling to sort of multiple spots to get one image, and the balance of how good is this idea with how much can I be bothered to try to execute it is not quite there yet,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one, and it's that thing about coming up with cliched ideas and things like that. But sometimes, well, as we know, cliches are cliches because they're good. But it's finding something new. But sometimes I guess you have to go through, or it helps perhaps to go through some of these cliches and work them through too, and then find something that comes from it that actually becomes your own, maybe.
Yeah. And I've been toying with the idea of doing this on digital first, just to kind of, speed up the process a little bit, because normally when I'm shooting a lot, I'll be able to get through a roll of film in like a couple of days or a couple of rolls per week. But I've been on this one roll of film in my MP since like November. I think I'm on frame 7, and the last 4 frames were pigeons. So the whole get through a roll of film and develop images is not really sort of keeping up pace wise. Right. I mean, I don't know about you, Simon, because you got your large format stuff, but like Johnny, most of your shooting has been digital over the last couple of months too, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, is that just out of convenience?
Out of laziness. Because I haven't been developing film. It's been a long time. I mean, I usually do it all in a big batches anyway, but I routinely go 6 months before I develop any film.
Right.
So, I've not hit my backlog yet where I feel like I really have to start developing. So out of pure laziness, I've been shooting, more digital stuff lately. So,
yeah, I think it's the same with me. I have a couple of rolls done, but I've just been way too lazy to go and actually develop them.
Yeah, right.
So, but at the same time, I can't really bring myself to bring a digital camera around with me everywhere. I don't know why. But
yeah,
I think maybe I
mean, I the only time I usually have a digital with me is if I'm going somewhere to shoot something.
Right.
Or when I was shooting a lot of cars, which I haven't been doing lately because the weather's crappy now. I would have a digital with me every day, but I still carry it like a film camera every day. I just don't take it out and use it.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
I always have it in my bag, but
right. In the bag, not being used.
I think in my case, I mean, you mentioned the large format thing, but I've not been taking pictures with large format either. And I think it was last week I just had to get out and take a photograph of something. Just to put that into a bit of context, we are in lockdown in the UK at the moment,
right?
And it's something close to being a proper lockdown. It's not like the original lockdown that we had back in March or so last year, or April, whenever it was. But it's similar to that, and certainly there's that feeling that you should not go out if you don't need to. It's as simple as that. And much as that time, I did not go out at all. And I've got no. Actually, no, I have got the desire to go out, but I just know that I shouldn't. So all I actually managed to do the other week was to take a photograph of a hydrangea in the garden because there was plenty of ice out there, and a good frost. And I was thinking, there's got to be something out there worth taking, and I've got to say, I was actually motivated by the fact that I've got a lens that I wanted to use. So as ever, it's gear, whether it be cameras or lenses, which was actually the thing that took me over the edge to go out. And the reason was, and I'm looking across at it now, I made an adapter to go from a Mamiya Press lens to Sony to Nex, and it's and this lens. When I first bought the camera, I bought the camera because it had this lens on it, so it's a Mamiya Press 100mm f2.8, which is, if anybody knows that system, it's not quite a unicorn lens, but it's probably the standout lens in the range, and they're very uncommon. And I was really lucky to drop on this one. And I'm not really that much of a fan of using larger lenses and with a smaller sensor, but this isn't too ungainly. And the fact that this lens has got such a good reputation, I was thinking to myself, well, what does it look like on digital? Because as we've spoke about this many times, larger format lenses tend not to be particularly high resolving lenses on digital, and generally because they don't need to be, because they used to be used with much larger film sizes. And so I thought, well, it's still worth the go. It's still education. Is this going to be rubbish, or is it going to be one of those lenses that surprises? Like I've said on a few occasions, like the Bronica lenses for the 645 system. I think they're absolutely excellent lenses, or at least the ones I've tried when I've put them onto the Sony. It's just the fact that they're just almost like, why bother though? Because they're just big. You can just get something smaller they'll be just as good. So I thought, just give it a go, and it really performed. It really was sharp. I mean, I've only actually got one other 100mm lens to hand that I could compare it against, and that was a Mamiya Optic Oristor. Is it Oristor or Oristor? Oh God, my eyes are...
Not a trio plan.
No. It's not Oristor. 100mm f2.8. Nice little lens, not the sharpest thing in the world, but just a nice lens, and it was clear that this Mamiya was sharper. Not of course that sharpness is everything, but it's still interesting to see that a larger format lens could be as sharp as that, and again that sort of reinforced the reputation of this lens. But it was because I made that adapter. That's ultimately what made me go out there to, does this work? Can I make this thing work? And it was okay, and it even handled well as well. Gear is a big driver for me to go out and take pictures.
That's the one that you shot that vintage looking photo of Flynn with, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, but I mean, you're right. The gear is a driver because, I mean, in classic gas fashion, the recently the thing that still gets me going in terms of like, oh man, I want all of these lenses, is vintage cinema lenses. And oh man, I was watching, there was this really stupid documentary on Netflix called, I think, The Death of 2020 or something. And it was this sort of like comedic look back on 2020 with a bunch of celebrities and stuff. And we watched like the first 20 minutes of it because it's terrible and super cheesy. But whatever lens they're using in that to shoot the indoor kind of bokeh close-up scenes is spectacular. And throughout those 20 minutes that we watched, I kept turning to my girlfriend and saying, I need to know what lens they're using. It's some kind of cinema lens, looks kind of anamorphic. I want it. And, I guess thinking about that, those can't be used. I can't use those on a film camera anyway. So I've really been wanting to go out and shoot some cinematic looking stuff on digital. But number one, I haven't chosen subject matter because it requires, very specific lighting and framing. But number two, I think more importantly, there's this dilemma where these cinema lenses, they work perfectly on Fuji because they cover APS-C. I'm talking about the Cook Speed Pencros now specifically. So they cover APS-C and they work perfectly on Fuji. But I just don't like the results that much. They look great, but they look very Fuji. And I like them. I like the results much better on my Sony. But these lenses sort of handle and fit better on Fuji. And so I've got this dilemma where I could just go take the A7R II out in crop mode, which would be the logical thing to do. But something about that just feels wrong because it's like I'm handicapping the capabilities of this camera in order to shoot APS-C with a full frame, like 42 megapixel Sony. And just something about that doesn't sit well with me, which I need to kind of get over and just go out and shoot the damn Sony. So, I mean, that's where we are. But I also think it's okay, right? Everyone goes through photographic ruts. And I don't even think this is a rut. I think it's just a really strange set of circumstances that makes shooting either very difficult or, I don't know. It's the source of like lack of inspiration. I don't think is a mystery at this point, right? It's not like a love of photography has disappeared. It's just you look outside, and either in the case of you guys, you just can't go outside, right? Because you're surrounded by COVID.
Yeah.
Or it's like, what am I going to shoot? Yeah.
I actually have this cycle pretty much every year where probably end of November, like into the fall, in through December and into January, I just don't shoot very much. And I tend to get really, really interested in shooting again when the light tends to get really good in Chicago, like end of January into February, when it's also really, really cold. It's like the two things go together. It gets really cold and the light gets really good. And then I want to shoot like crazy and it's fucking freezing, Yeah. But in a way it makes me want to shoot more because it's more challenging. So almost without fail, every year I go through this cycle where, come late January into February, I start shooting a lot more again.
So it's weather related.
Not necessarily. I think it's light related. I think I'm so in tune with the cycle of the light in Chicago, which tends to get really gray, like late fall and early winter, and then it starts to get much brighter again. Kind of midwinter. So I just kind of like when it's not sunny out, I don't want to take pictures of anything anyway. So I think it's more of that than anything else. Like I stopped paying as much attention because the light's bad. The light's not interesting.
Do you guys get most of your snowfall around that period when the kind of light picks up again as well?
I mean, we don't really get snow anymore because, the earth is dead. But in theory, yeah, I guess kind of. I mean, I don't know. It's weird. There's not like directly a correlation between the snowfall necessarily, but it seems like we have many more brighter days later in the winter. And I think that's an actual meteorological thing where when the air is really cold, there tends to be less cloud cover or something like that. At least that it does that here. So so it's when it gets really clear again, it tends to get really cold and clear, you know?
Right. I mean, snow is weird though, because when I was in Toronto, I found that on snowy days, when it's bright sunshine in snow, it's nice to be out, but aesthetically, I find it really hard to shoot in bright sunlight in snow because the shadows don't do what you want them to do. You know, there's like a natural reflector everywhere.
Right.
So like the shadows get filled in too much, and then you just have like this, everything is either blown out or just getting that, you know, making it look as white as it is.
Yeah.
It's really tricky.
So like I have this thing with orange filters. I have like this weird thing where I think they make everything look too textural. I don't know how to really describe that exactly, but it's different than yellow and it's different than a red. And orange to me has much more of a texture enhancing look to it. So when it's snowy is when I tend to use an orange filter because it's like you get the contrast sort of like a red filter, but you get more of the texture of everything and those blown out highlights or something. I'm not sure what it is. It seems like it works though.
Because red would be too over dramatic.
Yeah, red just is like, you know, I mean, I love red filters, but in snow, I mean, it's like lith film almost. So it's like orange brings out more of the texture and everything, and it gives there's like a little more detail, you know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's kind of the opposite here light wise because we have decent light all year, but in the winter, what happens is the sort of surrounding monsoons switch the direction of the wind, and so even though the temperature is like perfect now, and it's too hot in the summer, the winds are coming down from the north rather than blowing up from the south. And so as a result, all the pollution from China just like rushes in. So in the summer, we get sort of blue skies and nice weather when it's too hot. And in the winter, we just get smog, like blankets and blankets of smog. There's less this year because factory activity is down, but it's really picking up again now. And it's a double-edged sword because smog on the one hand is ugly, but on the other hand, it does make light look really good.
Yeah. Right.
No, it's true, man. It warms everything up. Yeah, it warms everything up. It's like every minute of the day is golden hour.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So sometimes, you know, I look at the sort of smog filled light and think, this is like a gorgeous sunset all day, right? I should go out and shoot it, but I also don't really want to be outside.
That's really funny. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking breaks like that. I think it's completely healthy and normal, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I expect the sort of motivation to shoot to come back naturally, but I'm a little disappointed because now is the best temperature. It's like, what's the temperature? It's like 16 degrees Celsius, right? So around 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
It's so nice. It's perfect. You know, people here are freezing their butts off, but it's gorgeous. Whereas in the summer, I don't know why I shoot in the summer. It's so uncomfortable. You know, 2 seconds outside and it's like 105 degrees and I'm just dripping in sweat. But for some reason, I'm shooting so much more in the summer when now would be the time to do it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just stupid. But
that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, any plans on your part for either of you to do any shooting anytime soon?
I've been toying with the idea for actually quite some time about doing some still life, because I've got I have a workshop now, because when I talk about making accessories and lens caps and things like that, that is actually my business now. I have a workshop. It's not completely fully operational, but it's a good space, and within that space I've got the ability to take photographs as well, and jig things around, and I could use a large format camera and get enough distance between the object and what it is that I actually want to take. And it's something I've been meaning to do now for months. So it's I've got the means to do it, but it's interesting. I still haven't done it, but I have the means to do it. So it is that motivational thing. But the other side of it is it's also tax month in the UK for me. So I have accounts to do, which really any sane person would have had these done months ago. But I thought, well, let's just wait until just a few days to go, and then cram 60 hours work into a very short period of time. So that's currently my plans, and that's sort of that can be quite paralysing at times, actually. So that, along with lockdown and things, it's tough. It's very, very tough. So who knows? Maybe that, or I might just wait till February.
The setup that you have with a workshop and large format cameras, I don't know, to me it just screams nude selfies. perfect setup for that. You only want to take one as well.
Yeah, you might think that. I might pass on that and just go with the still life flower that I have planned.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's awesome.
So moving the conversation on, there've been some other things that have happened, and actually I'm thinking I'm sure some other things that really have happened. Actually, something has happened in the last 24 hours, and Fuji have killed. Is it 400H film? Yeah. Is that effectively like their version of Portra? I'm not entirely sure what it is.
Yeah, essentially it's greener, but it's their sort of equivalent.
Yeah, I've never actually used it, but whether I haven't used it or not, it's still not good to see the end of a film. That obviously there are people out there that are going to miss it.
Yeah, it's a shame, but I mean, I think it was a long time coming because, color film wise, Fuji. They're in terms of color films, they really thrive on their, I guess, slide films, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I don't know. People should shoot more slide film. Every time I shoot a bunch of color film and then look at it, I'm like, oh, this looks like shit, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's because you don't like color print film, and you should always be shooting slide film. So just shoot more slide film.
Yeah, I bought a bunch of 400H a while back from a dude who was selling it in bulk, and it was mostly medium format. But I shot it alongside Kodak films, and I hear myself. There's echo.
Yes, we Houston, we have a problem. Try again.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that made it sound good or not, really, but there you go.
No, I heard my voice coming back out of Johnny's microphone because it has the little movie thing when you see the little squiggle when people talk. Anyway, I shot it alongside a bunch of Kodak films, mostly Portra, and I just like even Ektar. And I like the Kodak films so much more in terms of their color tone. But it is striking when you put them side by side how different they look. But I guess the thing to say is whenever any film dies, it's it's always a shame, right?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I'd rather that Fuji produce fewer films sustainably, and
right
that it's not more of an attraction for them to, kill more. I'd rather that they produce fewer films and make more money at it and keep doing it than, produce a buttload of films. Which, I mean, they really haven't been for a while, but
Yeah, I think things like bringing back Across in its newer form was a really cool and like smart move on their part, because I mean that's just a film that sells like hotcakes. Whereas I don't know what the sales figures are like on 400H, but to me it's always been when I don't have Portra, see if I can find some of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean it's their pro film. It's priced that way, and there's frankly, there's no market for it anymore. There's nobody shooting pro, basically, you know? So, I mean, it's not like you could justify. It's harder. It was hard. They were probably looking at how much they needed to charge for it to keep making it. And there's just not really a market for it at that price point because it's not pros buying it and expensing it, you know?
Right. I think they said something about how it's really hard for them to make now.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm sure they could have kept making it, but it's like the Jason Lane, you know, conversation about lenses. I mean, you could make that lens. It's just going to be so expensive, nobody would be able to buy it. I mean, it's possible, you know, it's the same thing. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I don't know. I would rather, like I said, I would rather they just keep making a few films, and I would trade. I'm glad to trade this film for them to be able to keep making acros. So,
right,
or Ilford.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I mean, it's, you know, I don't know, whatever. There's other options still. It's not like there's no other option than that film.
Well, if it makes people buy other things, who knows?
Yeah,
it could strengthen things a little bit. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's more business, honestly, for Kodak. It's more Portra, you know. So, which, I mean, I don't know. I don't have like market numbers in front of me, but I'm thinking that Portra probably outsold 400H, and they were really two competitive films, you know. You could look at it that way. So it's Fuji basically backing off of, you know, a market that was probably more competitive for them that they didn't need to compete in, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's one bit of news, and the other bit of news that is in my mind, I know that briefly chatted with Perry earlier, and we haven't really talked that much about the launch of new digital cameras for a while. I think not since we did the emergency show on the Z6 and the Z7 a few years ago, and then I think Canon brought something out not long after, and we just couldn't be bothered. But there is an interesting full frame digital camera that's been launched in the last couple of months, which I think is worth touching upon, and that's the Sony 7C. So that's a full frame Sony with the E mount or Nex mount. But the interesting thing about it is the form factor. So I know, Perry, you've got some thoughts on this, and so I'll let you go, and I'll probably chip in.
Yeah, I mean, we never talked about this camera, right? I mean, we don't really talk about new digital cameras that much, and it's not a market that I care about that much. But there have been, I think, only a handful of cameras that have been released recently that have caught my eye. One of them is a Sigma FP1. And then the other one is, of course, the A7C. And I mean, in a nutshell, it's an A6300 type body with a full frame sensor. And I think it's at a lower price point too, right? Or am I wrong about that?
Well, it's going to be lower than, say, an A7 III. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I just looked it up. It's like $1,700. It's $1,800.
Oh, well, screw that. Never mind.
Yeah, screw that. No. That's body only. Totally screw that. Jesus.
Oh man.
Yeah, but that's a shame. But that's at the moment. I mean, as we know with these things, they come down. There's only one direction these prices are going to go, and it will be in production forever. Pretty much like most Sony seem to be. You know, you can. I don't know what the oldest Sony digital camera that's on the market, but they probably got stuff that's out there that was new in 2010. I'm guessing you can still buy brand new now.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, unlike film cameras, the digital camera, especially Sony's, they're just going to plummet in price, right? Like, I can't believe how cheap some of the earlier A7 models are now in terms of what you get for the money. So at some point, the A7C is going to sort of fall by the wayside, and the same thing is going to happen. At which point, I might actually be interested in picking one up because, size is probably the main thing that stops me from using. Well, size and the fact that it's a Sony are the main things that stop me from using the A7R2 more. But something this kind of compact with it has a proper viewfinder, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't looked at it in detail, but it looks pretty much the same as something like a 6300 on paper.
Yeah.
With a few extra features here and there. To me, that's really appealing because that size factor is significantly smaller.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first sort of I guess the Canon EOS RP is a similar idea in terms of the size and form factor, but that mount is stupid, right? So to me, this is a really appealing camera. I didn't realize the price was so ridiculous, but when it comes down, I don't know. I might look to it to either replace or supplement the Fujis as a smaller alternative to the A7.
I mean, you mentioned. I was going to say, you mentioned that your A7 Mark II has been large. Well, it's not really, is it? But it's. I know where you're getting at there, because if you wanted to use rangefinder lenses, which I guess that might be where your interest is, Perry, rangefinder lenses, then the form factor of the C does actually make a lot more sense than it does with an A7 sort of small DSLR type of body. So I get that.
Well, I think I use non-rangefinder lenses just as much on the Sony. Because if it's a rangefinder lens, I can just stick it on like my M240, and that's a more enjoyable experience. Unless it's live view, which sucks on the 240. But we both have this small Billingham Hadley bag, right? And when you have a lens of a certain size on the Sony, the prism on top of the camera, and then a slightly larger lens makes it very awkward to fit inside that bag specifically. Correct. Right. And so the thing that the A7C has going for it is that prism is gone, which means sliding it into the Billingham Hadley small is just way, way easier. And like that's quite a big draw to me. I know it's only a couple of centimeters, but like those couple of centimeters are the difference between having to find some stupid angle to shove the camera into the bag versus actually having it be able to slide in and out seamlessly.
That's a really good point, because I mean that was one of the things I really liked when I borrowed Jeremy North's G2 system. Was I could go out with a small bag and 3 lenses, and everything would fit in there really easily, and that will be exactly the same. That's interesting. I mean, so it's and I think we'll transition to this. About older digital cameras shortly, because they were going to be headed in that direction. But it's. I mean, I've got my Sony A7 II. It's falling apart, but it just keeps on going, and I have absolutely zero desire to upgrade the camera, even if I could afford. I mean, I can't afford to buy a new camera, but even if I could, I wouldn't be looking at an A7 III or whatever. But it's really intriguing about the fact that I can buy a brand new version of the camera that I bought new in 2014, I think it was, when I bought my camera. And I'll be there thinking, well, what do I do? Would I just buy another one? Or would I perhaps, I think I'm sort of drawn to the A7 2R, or R2, whichever way around it is that you've got, Perry. I've always liked that camera. And it's got a couple of little things that are better. I'm not really that bothered about the extra megapixels. Well, there were a couple of little features in there that do appeal to me about that camera. But since you just talked about that form factor, I could really see that C being a good camera for us classic lens users, because that's the thing. Most of these cameras, and this is the reason why I don't really care too much about the cameras that have gone on past mine, is because we generally, if we don't use autofocus lenses, we don't care about all the things that have gone into those cameras since, apart from maybe if you really want to have those extra megapixels or a better EVF. Really, the EVF is probably the biggest thing that would really want to drive me towards a different camera, maybe, or appreciate a different camera. And I think actually the 7, I don't think it's any better than the EVF in my camera, actually. if I remember correctly. I think it's about 2.4 million pixels, but it's good enough. I'm used to it, and it's one of those things. If you've used to a better EVF and you drop down, then it's misery, true misery. But if you've never experienced anything better, or you've just had a fleeting go with it, then you can cope with it, and it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, exactly. And dude, the form factor thing that you were referring to at the beginning there, that's literally a large percentage of the reason why I shoot rangefinder cameras so much. Because every time I grab something like a Topcore RE Super and try to shove it into my bag, it doesn't fit, and I give up. And I don't carry these SLRs around because they just have one dimension that is off. So, something like an OM1 fits a lot better. And I guess it's kind of dumb to sort of fit the camera to the bag and not the other way around. But I like carrying that billing around so much that if something won't fit into it, I just don't want to use it. So something like a Rolleiflex fits really well because it's square and it just slides in. It doesn't have any awkward dimensions. But consistently, that's the thing with Fuji as well. The Fuji cameras are small enough that they fit no problem. So even though I think a lot of the times with certain lenses, I would much rather be using my Sony, it just becomes a chore to put it into the camera, put it into the bag. And especially if I want to bring other lenses, which when I'm shooting digital, I almost always want to do. Right. So it is important.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And yeah, I put a picture up today of a large format camera that I took. But so, I mean, I am taking photographs, but I'm taking photographs of gear, so I don't hardly really count that as going out and taking photos. But I was looking at that shot, and there's nothing about that image that I'm thinking, you know what, that sensor, in fact, actually, the sensor predates the A7 II. So it came out with the A7, the original A7. It's the same sensor, except it's got IBIS. And I look at what that's producing, and I also look around at what other people are producing. I'm thinking, no, I'm not seeing any improvement that would make a difference to me with the latest and greatest sensors that are coming out there. Yes, there's going to be better dynamic range, and and if I want to shoot at 64,000, I'll have less noise. Well, I just don't do any of those things. So it doesn't mean anything to me. But this sort of leads on to what we were talking earlier about. Will there be a day? And I'm going to say this, and then you can take over again, Perry. But will there be a day where there are classic digital cameras?
Yeah. So that is the question, right? It's 2021 now. It has been 20 years. 20 years ago, Canon released its first DSLR, the D30. Right, which by no means is the first digital camera, but that was the start of, at least for me, that was the start of the proper digital era when Canon started releasing DSLRs. And looking back, in the sort of snobby world of Leica, there is a very strange consensus that the M9 is somehow a classic looking digital camera because of the CCD sensor and its colors, which I think is BS. But it's just it's people's way of justifying, a corroding sensor. But I mean, the M9 and that issue aside, that is the question. Are there any digital cameras that you would consider classic, or will digital cameras ever fall into that same kind of ethos with which we look at classical lenses?
Can I just say right off the top, there is a classic digital camera collectors group on Facebook, by the way. So it's already a thing.
But sure. What do they collect? Are they collecting like the vintage, the cameras that are old but no one uses because they're unusable? Or are they like 5Ds and stuff?
No, it tends to be the older the better, and the jankier the better, So I mean, it's a thing. But I mean, I don't think it's going to be a thing long term, because having worked in a camera shop, anything more than 10 years old it's borderline unusable, because probably it has a battery that's not made anymore, and you can't, you can improvise chargers, but it's really tough when the batteries start disappearing, which they do.
I was going to say that, and there's the other thing is about the memory format that it takes. I mean, I talked about this a while back, where I took some photographs on an Agfa digital camera that uses a smart media card, and I still haven't seen the photographs that I took on it. Yeah. I know that I was so wishing I actually had a proper camera, because the lighting was amazing. And looking at the scene on the LCD on the back of this camera with I think 256 pixels, and even that looked great. And then I also found out that I was taking these photographs in like some kind of space saving mode, so I wasn't using the full resolution of this 0.8 megapixel camera. But the thing is, somebody had to Paul Bullock, in fact, has lent me an old Windows XP computer so that I can actually get the information off this card, so I can actually see the pictures.
Yeah, and some of the memory cards, this is hilarious. Some of the memory cards for these old cameras, I mean, they cost more than a modern SD card because nobody makes them anymore. Like some of the old memory stick stuff, it's just it's ridiculous. And people that like we would get people that come into Central Camera that would be like, oh, I really need a memory card for my camera, I'm traveling. It's like, all right, and they have this 12-year-old camera that's barely working. And then it's like, yeah, all right, that the memory card's going to be $50 for it, and they shit their pants. Oh, and they probably need a battery too, because their battery won't take a charge anymore. Mm. Oh, and they forgot their charger, so they can buy a battery, a charger, and a memory stick, and they're going to spend like $200. I mean, it's insane. So it's like these things have a lifespan to them based on just being able to power them up and put pictures on them. Mm-hmm. That said, I have in front of me in my hand my very first digital camera, which is a Sony Cybershot. I don't know what model it is, but it's a 7.2 megapixel with a Vario Tessar. And I took so many pictures I loved with this kid. This is the camera I got before I bought my first Canon DSLR. Mm-hmm. And I still love these cameras. Matter of fact, I'm thinking I'm going to take this camera out. I'm going to power it up, and I'm going to take pictures.
Is that one of those really thin ones that can like slide into a shirt pocket?
It's not that thin. It's shaped like a it's square on one end and it's really rounded on the other, and the lens is way over on one end. And I actually have 2 or 3 of them, because I started grabbing them at Central Camera after a while, because I'm like, oh, I love these things. So I have a black one around here too. But they're great. I mean, they're awesome. Like just throw in your pocket shit digital cameras, with a really nice lens. I love the shots I got out of these things. So I mean, they're still fun to use. It's just as long as you've got a battery that works and you've got something to store the photos on, why not? But I mean, eventually they're all gonna die. They're just, I mean, I know I've said it before, like all digital cameras are disposable. I mean, they're made to be used for a little while and replaced with something newer. They are just even Leicas. I know people don't want to admit it, but it's true. They're all disposable. So they're not going to last forever. You're supposed to get your value out of them while you use them and then get a new one.
Yeah, that to me is the thing that the reason why I don't think digital cameras will ever be classic in the way that film cameras and lenses are, because they lack that longevity, right? With the electronics, totally. They're going to die. And the same is with electronic film cameras, to be honest.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's not really any different. I mean, it's the same problem.
It's the mechanical electronic distinction is the sort of relevant part for me, right? Sure. Simon sounds like he's like itching to jump in here.
Well, I like old electronic cameras. It's as simple as that. But
yeah, they're great, but they're going to die.
Yeah, they will. And I think the key there is just making sure you don't pay silly money for them, like you buy your Contax T3 or whatever it is. That you just simply don't know if it's going to work tomorrow, and that's just it's just daft. But it does also apply with when you talk about batteries and things. I remember once coming across I think it was an Olympus point and shoot camera, and it was in perfect condition, and it almost held a charge. And I was thinking, oh, this is promising. And then I found out that the actual battery in it was workshop replaceable, or whatever the term is, service center replaceable battery. I'm thinking, what? Really? I mean, it was. I think it was rechargeable. That was a good thing. But yeah, once I went, you'd have to send it off to Olympus to get a new one. It's just nuts. Some of the decisions that were made. I mean, I took the battery out thinking, "Oh, can I do something with it?" And I saw it, and I thought, "No, I can't." Decisions of and disposable cameras certainly were and problems with batteries and electronics going back to like mercury batteries and so on. They go back a long way with these things. But I think there is something to be said about some old digital cameras. I mean, I'll look back at some of the digital photographs I took, because I left film in about early 90s. I stopped taking photographs full stop, and then I think I bought myself a bridge camera. I got an Olympus C8080 8080 CW, I think, something like that. So it was a wide angle zoom. And, I can look back at the photographs that I took with that, especially like my kids, and especially if I took those photographs in good light, and they're still looking good now. Fortunately, I've not lost them on my hard drive, but some of them are printed out, although they probably faded and so on. But they're absolutely fine. There's just nothing wrong with them. I think sometimes we just go over the top with. We talk about pixel peeping and things like that, but that was an 8 megapixel camera. I think I had a Fuji, like a vertical Fuji camera that was designed by Porsche or something like that, or the one that came after it with interpolated pixels. That took great photographs as well. So it's that thing about getting obsessed by the tech and actually forgetting about what actually matters, and it's about what the actual photograph looks like. And in good conditions with a decent lens, an old digital camera will produce good results.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the first digital camera I ever had was I think a Canon PowerShot A80 or something along those lines. And the first photo I ever had published in a student magazine, I shot with that, and I was pretty happy with it. And that camera took AA batteries, which maybe makes it a good candidate for a classic, but it fell apart. I used it so much that, it's mostly made of plastic. I used it so much that it literally fell apart. I think that the grip fell off, and then things just started falling off left, right, and center. But I mean, looking back at certainly some of the classic Canon, some of the older Canon DSLRs, I do look at cameras like the original 1D, maybe the 10D or 20D, maybe not the 5D, but I look at those cameras and I think, when I pick one up, I guess because the form factor hasn't evolved that much, like they still feel like pretty contemporary cameras. They're still very capable. Like if you handed me a 20D, it wouldn't feel like an old camera to me.
I still have my 20D.
Yeah, well, clearly you hoard everything. I can't believe you have the first digital camera you ever had. That's nuts to me. Does it still work?
Yeah, it works. Works great.
Holy crap!
Yeah, I mean, why would I get rid of it? I mean, why? I had no problem getting. Come on. Well, yeah, right. But I had no problem getting rid of my DSLRs when I switched to Fuji. But why would I get rid of this thing? It's just, if I ever need a junker, I can throw this camera at a 5-year-old and say, "Here, take some pictures."
Mm-hmm.
That's part of why I kept them. Actually, is so the kid could mess around with them. But
that makes sense.
Yeah. But no, my 20D, that thing, those things that's when they actually they didn't build them for shit. Like they went after the 5D and the 20D, they just continued to go consistently downhill in terms of quality. So, all that, the same thing with the Nikons. Was it like the D300 or the D90? Those things are going to last forever because they actually built them really well because the market was so competitive then, So it's like the older generation Canons and Nikons they're like rock solid. Those things will just keep going. Like the original 5D will just keep going.
Yeah, mine still works. It's the only DSLR I own, and I've never felt a need to upgrade it. But it's interesting you say that, because I think there is something about that generation when I think of the likes of, the 1DS Mark II, 1D Mark II-N, 20D and 30D. Like after the 30D, when the kind of 40D was introduced,
totally.
Yes, some of that magic disappeared. But maybe it was a mixture of novelty as well, because the leap in quality between like the original 1D and like 20D and the first Rebel, the leap in quality between that and the sort of second gen. Right. Like if you put a 20D and a 10D next to each other, the 20D is like light years ahead of the 10D.
Right. Totally.
But then after the 30D, and certainly the 5D Mark II, it's pretty incremental at that point, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it was that thing though, that era of cameras. They were like, it was like every new, 1 megapixel bigger sensor was a reason to like buy a whole new camera, because the ISO performance was so much better. I mean, I was in that horrible cycle because I was shooting commercially then, and I bought a 20D, and then I bought a 30D, and then I bought two 40Ds, and then I bought two 7Ds because I was like using them for business stuff, and the megapixel and ISO performance jumped so much between each generation of camera. I mean, I fucking think of the money I wasted on that shit now, and it just kills me, because the 70 sucked. I hated this. The 70 Mark I, piece of shit. I mean, that sensor, it took the dynamic range of that sensor took a noticeable drop even from the 40D. So I basically bought two of them and sold them back almost right away and just started shooting the 40Ds again. I hated that camera because it was like the first one where they were really diving into video. It was really for the video. It was the first DSLR that Canon made where the video capability was a bigger deal than the still capability. And they shorted on the still capability on that camera to give it the video, but oh man, garbage. Garbage.
I'm curious now because this era I pretty much completely checked out of photography, and I'm just wondering, were people adapting classic lenses to Canon DSLRs like many people do now?
That was my gateway into shooting classic lenses again. Actually, was I hated the autofocus lenses so much on the EOS system that I was like, I used to actually like taking photos. When I didn't have to chase a focus point around my viewfinder, I used to actually like taking photos. So I was like, I can put M42 lenses on here. And that was the first thing I ever did, was threw M42 lenses on my Canon DSLR. And then I realized, oh, wow, this viewfinder sucks balls because it wasn't meant for manual focus. It was assuming you would never manual focus anything, because why would you do that? So it's got the shitty viewfinder because you don't need a good viewfinder if it's autofocus. So then I was like, wow, this really blows. It's great to have a real lens again, but this camera sucks for manual focus. So that's exactly how I got to the Fujis. Because I could have a camera that worked with manual lenses again and a better viewfinder. And everything fell into place then,
Yeah, I think in answer to Simon's question, that the very similar thing with me, with the newer, after the sort of 40D, every increment of digital camera seemed to primarily market itself as an updated autofocus system, as well as the megapixels and stuff. And, A, I was perfectly content with the 5D, but B, I found that, when the focus was so much on, no pun intended, on the autofocus system, anything that wasn't quite perfect was annoying. Like I had a 1D Mark III at one point, and I loved that camera. And then I went on to like DP Review and started reading everyone crapping on its autofocus system. And I was like, oh crap, this thing back focuses when it's in like continuous focus mode. Oh no, it's unacceptable. Get rid of it. Even though I think that's one of the best cameras I ever used. But the same thing for me, when I discovered that the 5D, when I discovered that the Canon system had a shorter flange distance, one of the first things I did was I picked up SMC Takumar 55 1.8 that I still have, and I adapted it to the 5D, and when I found that there's a specific focusing screen for manual focus lenses, I bought that screen, and I liked it even for the EOS lenses, because I like being able to see the plane of focus much more clearly than on the sort of stock DSLR focusing screens.
Right.
But that setup still works great for me, and I think the 5D with that focusing screen is lovely, and it doesn't have like, autofocus points all over the place to distract you as well.
Right.
So, yeah, and I was adapting stuff to the Canon 5D platform up until, I got my first mirrorless camera as well. So same kind of thing.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, and it wasn't even for the vintage look back then, or it wasn't even like, oh, these old film lenses, I can kind of bring them back to life.
No,
it was more just like, oh, these are cheap as hell.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
and a little different.
That was my other thing, is the Canon 51.4, just the basic one, is a piece of crap. It's built crap. The optics are crap. It's a piece of shit. And I hate that lens so much. And I broke 3 of them. I broke 3 of those lenses. Yeah. And because that focus motors in them were like, there was nothing to them. I mean, I had one of those lenses fall off a chair onto a shag carpet that's 1.5 feet, and it destroyed the focus motors. And I was like, screw this. So then, and as soon as I put a 51.4 Takumar on there, I'm like, this blows the Canon lens away image quality wise, Yeah. So
those oh man, the Canon 50 mils, the 1.8 is just like this toy.
Yeah.
And I remember I have all of them. I do like the 1.2. I like the 1.2 a lot, even though it can't focus properly.
Yeah, but the 1.8 is actually a really nice lens for the money. It's cheap as hell, and it's
optically, But I mean, you've seen them fall apart as well.
Right? Oh yeah, but I mean, I would tell people literally not to buy the 51.4. But I mean, there is no reason to own that lens.
I think that lens is a piece of crap as well.
Yeah, it's a piece of crap. And the only reason to own it is to shoot it at 1.4, and it blows at 1.4. So just get the 1.8 for $125 and be done with it.
And just to crap on the 1.4 more, this is the Canon EF one. Yeah. The build quality is terrible. The focus ring is like,
it's horrible.
There's nothing enjoyable about using that thing. No. And it doesn't even have like the ultrasonic motor, and so when it's autofocusing, it's like
it's a horrible lens. It's a horrible lens.
That lens.
That really was my inspiration to start doing manual. That's why I'm speaking to you on the podcast today. Is that piece of shit 51.4 EF Canon? Thanks, Canon.
But the 1.8 has a classic version, right? Where like people seek out the one with the metal mount, the first version.
Yeah, it does.
Because it's not this plastic toy that just, I've had a couple of those 1.8s, and a few of them, the front has just fallen off. Like all the elements have fallen away from the autofocus
That
system.
will happen. Yes.
It's like, oops.
You know what the real bargain though is, I have to say, is the 40 millimeter lens. That 40 millimeter EF lens is awesome.
The new one, the like pancakey one,
the little pancake one.
I have that lens. It's lovely.
It's awesome, and it's cheap. It's like $125. That is a great lens.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic.
Yeah,
lens.
I think I gave it to my brother, but that lens is fantastic. Yeah.
Yep. Really nice.
Now I've been. I don't know if I'm just confusing it now with Nikon, but I was under the impression that optically the EF 1.4 was the same as the FD before it, and therefore the same as the FL, but just with coating changes.
I cannot imagine how that's possibly true.
No,
I can't be the case. No, first of all, I mean, I think, well, I don't know if it's all glass or I think it's all glass. I know the 51.8, some of them are plastic. But I think the 51.4 is all glass at least. But there's just no way. Or okay, here this could be the other thing. I think, Simon, is that optically it might be the same, but build quality wise, it's such a piece of shit that
it's so bad.
That right, exactly. So optically, it might technically be the same optics, but there's no way you get that performance out of it.
Yeah, and that goes back to again second time of today's show we're mentioning Jason Lane.
Yes,
and. He's made it very, very clear that optical performance is is not just about the optics. It's about the body that it sits in as well, and the tolerances within that body.
Yeah,
totally. And I have to believe that's the problem with that. I mean, I'm not even kidding you. When I first got one of the first really, really classic lenses I bought, you'll love this, Simon, was a 1955, a little tiny Carl Zeiss Tessar, the 52.8. And that lens destroys the image quality of the Canon 51.4 EF at any stop, at any aperture except 2.8, where it glows a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But any aperture, I couldn't believe the first time I shot that lens how it stomped on the Canon lens, the modern Canon lens, right?
Yeah. I
couldn't believe it.
and the FD lenses, they feel like proper lenses, because the other thing about that 51.4 EF is it straddles this weird midpoint between like the plastic fantastic 1.8s and then the sort of L line.
Right.
So it has the features of the high end lenses, but none of them feel good. So for example, one of the more desirable elements of the higher end lenses is they have full-time manual focus. Right, where you can you turn the focus ring, and at any point you can manual focus without having to switch it.
Yeah, exactly.
But on the 51.4, that thing it turns into sand.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's like jerking off with sand. Yes. Thanks for the analogy, Perry.
You know what I mean, right? Every single one I've tried, it feels like there's sand inside.
They're horrible. I mean, honestly, I don't even think the L lenses feel that good, but compared,
they feel way better than this thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Don't buy that lens. And then there's so many reviews online that say like, oh, this is the one Canon lens you should buy, the 51.4. And I remember that because it was such a hyped lens, it was like, oh, you got to have a prime lens. You can't only have zoom lenses.
Right.
The 1.8 is this plastic thing that's going to break apart, which is true. It's like, so you got to get the 1.4.
I think that,
and it was like,
it must have been because those people had affiliate links on their site, because, go and buy this $450 lens rather than this $125 lens is actually better. That can be the only explanation for that review.
Or you just get sucked into the cult of Canon because, brand fanboyism was totally a thing back then as well.
Right.
And so when your choices are the 1.8, the 1.4, and the 1.2, then you can make a reasonable case there, right?
Yeah. I guess so. I mean, I think this is a really old conversation though, because I think going way back, the 1.8 lenses were always the value lens. And I think they almost always outperform the faster lens anyway.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
So I think it's a really old, I think the 1.4 thing it's marketing going back a long, long way. You know what I mean? You're just fine with the F2. You really are. But you get convinced you need the faster lens, I guess. Something like that.
Because you do. Because you do need a faster lens, and that's
right.
And that's all there is to it. And I think on that note that we're all in agreement, we should start to wind things down. But as I said, it was going to be a short show. And
good call. It just turned stroke of 5 p.m. here.
Exactly.
Really well done. Really well done.
Yeah.
Mate.
Thank you. So Perry, outside of this, actually no, you give a chance to give you a shout out. Any shout outs, Perry?
Shout out. No. One shout out just to my brother because it's his birthday. So happy birthday.
Happy birthday, brother.
Yeah. His name is Lawrence.
Oh, there you go. And Johnny, have you got any shout outs?
I do actually. I remember him this week. So I shout out to Christopher J. May, who he donated a Petri to my Petri rangefinder collection. So he actually stopped by, and I had a socially distanced chat with Christopher a week ago or so, which was awesome. And he donated a Petri rangefinder that he was not using, and he's an 8x10 guy now. He's mainly shooting like 8x10s, and then he's got a Rolleiflex, and he's got he got a new Nikon. So he's got a Nikon, full frame. What is it, the Z6 or Z7?
Oh, and not an 850 then.
No.
It would be insufferable if he had one of those.
Yeah, he would be insufferable. Christopher J. May, he's many things, but he's definitely not insufferable in any way, shape, or form. But anyway, he has the new Nikon, and we were chatting about lenses, and I know he recently got the H Nikkor, the 50 f2, which again, top of my list as one of the best 50 millimeter rangefinder lenses ever. Anyway, he got that one, so he's messing around with that. So shout out to Christopher. It was good to see you, and thanks for the Petri. You joined the family. That was super cool. And what else? I'll give a shout out to my dad. It would have been let's see, his 50. Oh my God, he told me 57th, 50 something wedding anniversary yesterday.
Oh wow.
Would have been. My mom's passed away, but anyway, that was cool to chat with him real quick. So shout out to the old man.
So Perry, outside of this show, how can people follow the things that you do?
Do you have zero shout outs, Simon?
Oh, I did a podcast earlier on with a shout out. I was quite proud of myself. And if I have, I've completely forgotten. So we'll pass on that one and pretend that didn't happen. So Perry, yes, how can people do things with you?
You can find me on Instagram and Flickr at Perry G. I'm not posting a lot at the moment just because I don't have film developed, and I'm also not posting a lot on in the Facebook group right now, primarily because social media is a little bit scary in Hong Kong right now. Just FYI. So I need to gauge sort of safety before I post anything publicly as well.
Oh, you know what? You've just reminded me. There is a shout out that we need to give as a podcast actually, and that's to Bernard in our Facebook group. Actually, didn't Bernard win a? He won the 40mm Konica, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
That's it. Well, Bernard's been looking for us because he's been worried about us, and we haven't been around because we've all been quiet in the Facebook group. And I'm just trying to find the post, but he certainly, I don't know if he actually made a video, but he was certainly commenting over on a video, and he was effectively having a conversation with himself in the comments as well. Wondering where we were. We're back, and we'll do this again. Bernard Sperling, thank you very much for that. Appreciate that.
And who was it that drank Malort?
Christa Brandt.
But it wasn't real Malort.
That's it. It wasn't real Malort. No,
he drank top shelf actual liquor.
Yeah, like Swedish Malort.
Like the real stuff, not the Malort garbage.
I think he is Swedish as well. So I think genetically,
we had this conversation quite a while. This was not a new thing, right? I mean,
he posted a video.
Yeah. Well, the video was like 6 months ago as well, so we might have even spoken about it. But I completely forgotten about it, and I thought, oh wow, look at this. And then, I was disappointed to see that he drank the genuine stuff, not the.
Do you know why you forgot about it, Simon?
Why?
Because you've never actually drank Malort. I got to send those bottles off to you guys. That's got to happen sometime soon. The live Malort tasting.
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah, right.
And I just realised, I've hardly been in the group at all, and there are multiple posts on there wondering where on earth we are. So we love you all. We're back. So there's that. Okay, Johnny, how can people find your porch?
You can do that. That is actually the best way to contact me right now, is to show up on my porch. 6 feet away from me on my porch or whatever. Because you're not gonna find me anywhere else. That's the only place it's gonna happen right now. I did want to leave two final thoughts. Did I already forget one of them? Well, the first one. I think I already forgot one of them. I did. I totally forgot one. Anyway, the first one was.
Or was it the
real
second?
Quick on the way. No, this is the first one. maybe I'll remember the second one if I talk about the first one. How many APS-C cameras do you think in the same form factor of this new what is it, A7C?
Mm-hmm.
How many APS-C cameras do you think Sony still has in their lineup in that form factor? Just off the top of your head. I mean, what would be your guess? What would be a logical number of cameras that
like as in still you can still buy it new?
That you can still buy, that are still in their catalog and you can still buy.
I think you can still get the 6000, I think. So 6,000?
6300? 6300 is still available, right?
Well, if the 6,000 is, I would have thought so. And then you got the 60. Is there a 64 and a 65?
You can still get. Hold on a second. Don't
say there's a Next 7 still or something like that.
No, you can still get a 5100. They have 8. Count them, 8 APS-C sensor A5000 series cameras, and by that I mean all the 5 and all the 6s. This is why these camera companies are so fucked up. They have like their bean counters have all these little slivers of markets where they're going to sell 12 cameras next year.
I was going to guess 3.
It's ridiculous.
And that seemed excessive.
I mean, I just say bad things about Nikon, but that's ridiculous. You guys, stop making all these stupid cameras. How do you think
that's too many?
It's absurd.
I like the A6000.
I don't think I remember my second thing.
Yeah, I think the A6000 is a good camera. I remember.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the part of the problem. It's such a good camera that nobody wanted to upgrade to anything. That's like probably why they finally had to do a full frame version of it to give these people some reason to upgrade. Yeah, it didn't come to me. Sorry.
Okay.
Lost it.
Next time. And
probably wasn't that important.
Yeah. So actually, while this is in my mind, before it drops out like a sieve, before I come back to you, Johnny, is next week. We'll probably say next week. Who knows? Next week after, whichever. But next time, we have emails that we don't have too many that we can't get through in a single episode. So we're going to try and get through those emails, and then after that, we'll find a guest to talk to. So now I've remembered that those two things. Back to Johnny, and just in case you remember the second thing.
Wait, hold on. Let me focus for like 5 seconds, and maybe it'll come to me. Talked about the Sony. Talked about my front porch. Nope, it's not there. Sorry.
Wedding anniversaries?
Wedding anniversaries? Nope, it's not there. I can't remember what it was.
Okay.
I'll remember after we're off the podcast.
Okay. So if somebody wants to write into the show, what's the best way of doing that?
Classic Lenses Podcast at gmail.com for the emails. Let's see, Instagram. Check out Best Vintage Lens, of course. Check out the Classic Lenses Podcast website for all the old episodes and the swag. And what else? I don't know.
That's enough.
Anything else? You can look this bullshit up on YouTube too.
Yes.
If you want to do that.
Yeah, if it carries across, it doesn't always carry across.
Right.
But,
when it feels like it.
Exactly. Oh, Johnny, I'll ask you live on air because I've already forgotten to ask you this several times now. And that is, this podcast is disappearing on a weekly basis on Apple iTunes or whatever, Apple Podcast, whatever it is that's used over there. And that is because Pobean, our host, has arbitrarily sets it up so that it only sends over to people 100 episodes. Oh. So every time we do an episode, one is effectively removed from Apple.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's really nice of Apple, isn't it?
No. It's for this time. It's not actually Apple's fault. Much as I like to blame Apple and Fuji for everything, it's not them or Fuji for that matter. But I did actually try to go into the settings and I couldn't make it work because it kept asking for an RSS2 feed, which as soon as I tried to change it,
I'll poke around in there.
Exactly. So
I remembered. Sorry, go ahead. I will look around and see if I can figure out why it's doing that.
Cool.
Yeah. So Perry, I know I have the solution for your problem. You just need to go on Chinese
Which
Parlor.
one? He has many.
His social media problem. Just go on Chinese Parlor.
So I know I said this to you guys privately. It annoys me so much that you guys, Americans specifically, pronounce that app Parlor. I mean, even if that's the way that the people who made the app want to pronounce it,
yeah,
they're wrong. Clearly, it's French, right? Like parler, to speak.
Like parler, yeah.
Yeah. So that irritates me to no end. I mean, all the kind of like right-wing extremism and like Nazi stuff,
right.
yeah, that's bad. But
pronouncing it Parlor is worse.
The name of this app is clearly an homage to the French to speak. So for the love of God, if you're going to use this app to like, do whatever it is Nazis do, just like pronounce it properly, right?
So no, that's my freedom app. I'm not pronouncing it like no Frenchman. It's my freedom app. It's my freedom of speech app.
Exactly. I thought we sort of put this one to bed with when Hamish told us that story about walking into a camera store and he started calling a Carl Zeiss Jena lens Jena and sort of him and the guy behind the desk and I saying why is everybody calling this Jena all of a sudden? And it's we were partially responsible for that. So which now means I don't actually know how to say that word anymore.
Wait, so Perry, should they be calling it parlay?
Oh no, I was talking about the J word in Germany.
Oh, the J word.
The river. Yeah.
But yes to both. Yeah, parlay.
No, that doesn't work, Perry. I'm really sorry. that doesn't work for a under the radar, not really under the radar, white supremacist private chat.
Well, no, man. A parlor is a place where you go get your nails done, you go get a massage, or a English midfielder from the Arsene Wenger era.
Oh,
but
right.
I think that's kind of the point, though, of why it's called parlor. It's like a meeting place where you talk about white supremacy.
Well,
it's like a white supremacy tea parlor.
Well, in parts, I mean, it's gone out of fashion now, but certainly where I am in the North Midlands and probably the north of England as well, if you lived in a terraced house, then your front room if anybody would walk into the front room, into the house, they would walk through the room itself. Because some rooms some houses would have a hallway, but plenty of them around here wouldn't have a hallway, and you would walk through the front room to the living room, which is the second room, and they would walk through the parlour, which is pretty much like a showroom of just how sophisticated and the height of taste that people would have, and nobody that lived in the house would ever be able to sit in the chairs or anything like that. That's the parlor.
We have the Chicago equivalent of that, actually. It's called the French room.
Yeah.
The French room?
No, like French.
Oh, okay.
Like French room.
Well,
it's like front room and French room or something. I mean, it's the same, but Simon, it's the same totally bogus, like bougie idea of,
But actually, what we've now learned is it's actually the white supremacist room.
It's the white supremacist. So one more story. When I lived in Quincy, Massachusetts, which out there you have to call it Quincy, like Z with a Z, but it's spelled like Quincy because it's where our first and second president of the United States were from, John Quincy Adams and John Adams. But in Quincy, Massachusetts, there was this. It was like a house, right? And they had on the first floor. I got to look this up in Google Maps now. But like on the first floor, like obviously the husband and wife had their own ideas about what they wanted to do as a like home business kind of thing, like if you had a B&B or whatever. So the wife had a tea shop, and the husband had a gun shop. So you'd go by this building that looked like just a house, and it would say gun shop and tea room, and it was awesome.
Oh, man.
I don't know. I don't think I ever went in the tea shop. I'm pretty sure I went in the gun shop though. All right.
Well, there we go. Let's try and go. And it was almost like an outtake in the middle of the show there. And
wait, we didn't talk about maple syrup yet.
Oh, that's going to have to wait for another time now.
All right, next time.
So last thing, Simon. So your British parlor is what we would call the vestibule, right?
That vestibule doesn't. Vestibule sounds like a body part. It sounds like. It's
like the little entrance room into a house or a space. Like when you open the front door, it's the vestibule.
I think that's an urban that's like slang for vagina in Urban Dictionary, I'm pretty sure. The vestibule.
We really should go.
We really should go. Yeah. We're going to start talking about vestibular body parts now.
Yeah. And
vestigial body parts.
Yeah. And I don't think, have I mentioned, I can be found on Twitter as Simon4. I'm on Instagram as Simon Forster Photographic, which is also the name of my website where you can buy lots of lens caps and things like that. And you can hear me once every couple of weeks or so on the large format photography podcast with Andrew Bartram and Eric Mathy. And Eric Mathy will be a guest on this show at some point because Eric's ace and he makes his own lenses.
Cool.
So that needs to happen sooner rather than later. Anything else? I think that's it. Our music is by Kevin McLeod of Incompetech.com. And I hope you've enjoyed this week's show. And if you can, be like Carl.